Welcome. This is Real Bait number 5, and I have got with me Sian Sutherland. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ian. Delighted to be here. Finally, we made it.
Fantastic to have you. I'm just going to make sure my screen's in the right view so I can actually see you properly. There we go. You're on the top, I'm on the bottom. I presume it's going to record like that. I don't know. Anyway, without further ado, what we're going to be talking about today is how society has become so dependent on fossil-based plastics, specifically around packaging, for protecting and promoting consumer products. And we'll be discussing some viable alternatives and what Plastic Planet is doing to turn off the plastic tap. So first of all, what do you like doing when you're not trying to convince government, brands and retailers to divert their attention away from plastic?
So that's a really easy answer. Well, firstly, I should say I absolutely love what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So, and I do wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, I'm so bloody lucky. You know, as you know, I'm an entrepreneur, and so I've been involved in many different businesses, and now doing what I'm doing right now, I do wake up in the morning and think, how lucky am I? Look at the day I've got in front of me and the exciting calls, and you know, it's not always great, but most of the time I feel very blessed to do what I do. And when I'm not doing it, then I have very simple needs, and that is probably having this is my drink of choice, chili mezcal margarita. Ooh. On the rocks with salt. If you haven't tried one, it's a game changer. Use mezcal rather than tequila. It gives it that little smokiness. It's my favorite drink of all time. And tequila just, I don't know, it just makes you happy. You know, gin can make you a bit down. Tequila never does that. So one of those in my hand, and I am dancing with my mates on a Greek island beach. That is my happy place.
Dancing with your mates?
Dancing with my mates, yes, or my girl mates on a Greek island beach. Or I'm sailing with my family. You know, we're a big lover of the sea. Or if I'm not allowed, you know, as in COVID times, if I'm not allowed to be on a plane going anywhere, then for me, what I absolutely love doing is walking along the Jurassic coast in Dorset, where we have a place we've had for many years, down there, and just be able to walk along that Jurassic coast, looking down over the ocean and into the valley with all the green lush fields. But that is just amazing. And it's really, we've traveled so much, all of us, you know, we go places and realize, oh God, it's so beautiful. Like, I don't know, going to the Amalfi Coast or somewhere. And then you realize how incredibly beautiful I think the UK is.
Oh, we are so lucky, aren't we?
Yeah.
Where's the most far-flung, crazy place you've been to? With pleasure, but also then with work?
The most crazy place I've ever been to is in another life. I used to do some production stuff in China, and being in darkest, deepest China, when they had the Olympics, a lot changed in China. This was way before then. There was lots of talk about, I don't know, yes, human rights, but also kidnapping. And I was there on my own, visiting things like candle factories. And just the craziest of places, and artificial flower factories where they had one pressing machine and they were pumping out millions. And I'd say, why don't you automate this a bit more? So, well, because people are so cheap. Why would we get a machine when we can just get more people? And I think that was, work-wise, one of the most insightful places I've ever been, just realizing, wow, what an extraordinary and very different culture it is in China. And my most far-flung place, you know, I love Asia. I love go to places like Thailand. There is an island in Thailand called Koh Lanta, which has a 6-mile white beach. And along that white beach, there is the perfect cocktail bar for sundowners, the tailor, and the lovely Thai massage place. Press repeat, all the way down for 6 miles. So that is your perfect beach.
Wow.
That's, yeah. Do you want to be there now?
I love Thailand as well. I've had some wonderful times in Thailand. And as it's, it's just gone 6 o'clock, so I think we're allowed to have a drink. So let's have a drink.
Cheers.
Far-flung places and places, friends around the world.
Yes, yeah, and to finally one day perhaps being able to go back there.
Absolutely. So come on, tell me, how did it all start? Plastic Planet, a Plastic Planet. When and why and how?
Well, as I mentioned before, I've been an entrepreneur for since I was very young, and completely unemployable now. And I've been involved in many different businesses. You know, my first business, I was in advertising. I left and I opened a restaurant in Soho, and had, you know, this very young, dynamic team. And we won a Michelin Star in our first year, and that was amazing but terrible. So I'd spent 5 years in that mercurial world of restaurants, and anything you've ever seen with Gordon Ramsay and Kitchen Nightmares, times it by 10. It's the most extraordinary, incredible and awful place. You know, there's so many, it is definitely the most mercurial thing I've ever done. Anyway, married my restaurant manager. 30 years married this year, Ian. And I don't know about you. I don't know anyone. You know, if you work with your partner, I doff my cap.
I have done. Yes, have done that.
Yes, and I think it's, you know, it's difficult. So I left and I went back to my marketing roots, and I set up a design agency with a creative partner, and then we created brands for other people. So, you know, through that, long story short, we created a skincare range, which was really to answer our needs. And that was, we were going through our baby making years, and we created a skincare range that was premium pregnancy skincare, which sounds like a no-brainer now, but, you know, many years ago, those two words had never been put together before, pregnancy and skincare. And then we launched that as a standalone brand, raised the finance for it, launched it in the US, and then I managed and grew that company for 10 years. So as you can imagine, I am no plastic saint.
No.
You know, the hundreds of thousands of unrecyclable, let alone unrecycled, plastic bits of packaging I have personally pumped out into the environment, I cannot tell you. And then it was at the latter stages of, we were selling the brand, exiting to a big online player called the Hut Group. And as we were exiting, I was asked to advise the Hong Kong board of a documentary filmmaker who were making the first ever feature documentary about plastic in the ocean. And it's called A Plastic Ocean. And that for me was my epiphany. You know, I knew nothing about what we have done, what we continue to do every single day. And, you know, the environmental disaster that we have caused with our throwaway society, you know, our short-termist attitude to everything. And as I exited the brand, I was then at the point, like many entrepreneurs, where you think, oh, I can perhaps advise other entrepreneurial companies, but I couldn't leave the plastic thing alone. And then, so Frederica Magnuson, my co-founder, and I, we finally decided perhaps we could create a different kind of company that was not a non-profit or an NGO or a charity in the traditional sense. But, you know, obviously I'm an entrepreneur, so I believe passionately in the power of business to create change. So was there an opportunity to create a different kind of organization that was pro-business, that ignited business from within rather than attacking it from the outside? And so we decided that we would launch an organization called A Plastic Planet, and have a very simple goal, which is to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap, not to get sidelined by recycling or anything else. Just, we all know that tap is on full. We are mopping up the bathroom floor. We're looking at all kinds of alternatives, but we're never turning the tap off. So our focus is we have to turn that tap off. And our first campaign was the Plastic Free Aisle campaign. And that took us a year, actually. And in that year, wonderful Sir David Attenborough, Blue Planet 2 happened, the world woke up really to the plastic crisis, and we had a lot of media attention, and all the supermarket guys would take our meetings, but actually had no intention of really changing. And then it took a real inspirational radical who, Eric Doze, who owns a chain of supermarkets over in the Netherlands. And he contacted us to say, I've heard what you're doing. I want to be the first. I think I want to be the first plastic-free aisle.
Eco Plaza.
Eco Plaza, yep. And so it was actually this month, it was 3 years ago this month, that we opened the world's first plastic-free aisle. And at that time, I think the world, we had incredible media attention, global media attention. And yes, we do an amazing comms agency, but it was also at a time when the world needed hope, because everybody had woken up to, what on earth are we doing? Look what's happening with all our plastic. They feel terrible. We all felt guilty and angry, a bit scared. And yet you were still shopping, and there was a pact or a pledge about change down the road, but you were still filling your basket full of all this plastic, and then take it home, chuck it in the bin, in the vain hope that it might get recycled. And then the aisle opened, and suddenly there was this symbol of hope that change could happen today, not in 5 years or 10 years and all the other pacts and pledges, but this is what you can do today. You can shop plastic free. So it became a real catalyst, I think, for change, and was mentioned when Theresa May was in power. It was included in her 40-year environment speech, laying out the environment plan. And it became a little bit of common parlance. And it's funny that I still meet people today, particularly in the US, who will say, oh my God, you're the plastic-free art people. We need one over here. I say, we're never doing it again. We've moved on. That was then. There's more things, there's more bigger nuts to crack now.
So what retailers, have they followed Ecoplaza's lead?
Sorry, what are
the other retailers followed Ecoplaza's lead?
I think there'll only be one plastic-free aisle because there's really only ever one first. But I think it has really created a lot of attention around the issue and a lot of public outrage, really, of why is change so slow? I was on a call just now. We were saying, why can you still buy a plastic wrapped coconut in Marks and Spencer's? Why do these things still exist when we know that there are alternatives? And in a world where we were very much, this is about choice. Why we need the choice to be able to buy plastic free. Actually, I think now, why do we have the choice? We know it's the wrong thing. Surely what we should have instead is less choice. People buy what they are sold.
Yep.
And I feel that it's the supermarkets, it's the brands' role now. Just sell us something different. We don't want the guilt anymore.
So what do you see as been the major obstacles along the way? What have been the barriers to people changing, or to brands and retailers changing and adopting plastic free?
I think it's money. Fundamentally, it's money. And somebody said to me the other day, it was a brilliant expression of, you look at what we're expecting CEOs of big businesses to do right now. It is like they're flying a fighter jet and you're asking them to change the engine mid-flight. Because we're not only asking them to stop using plastic in the same way, everybody needs to move to a model of more circularity, and everything that the business is built on isn't relevant anymore. So they're changing the engine, but to be honest, they're also changing the fuel. So they're changing the fuel tank at the same time, and that's how difficult it is for big businesses to change. But they know they have to. I feel that the pandemic has created this line across the world of business right now. And there are some businesses who feel that they can just kind of tread water right now, soft pedal, everything's going to go back to normal, it'll be back to how it was. I don't believe that's true anymore. I feel the pace of change is sped up so quickly that if you're not one of those companies that steps over that line and reimagines and reinvents themselves in a different way for the new model of how we are going to rebuild our economies, how we will take and make and not waste anymore. If you don't step over that line, then you are going to be a future dinosaur.
So how do you see the really big multinational brands coping with that seismic change? It's essentially moving from based driven economy to a new material, whether that's electric or new materials. How do you see them doing that?
I think what has happened is everybody started thinking we just need a new material. We can carry on with the same model. We can have that, that amazing convenience that we're all equally addicted to. But that has now changed. And I think a lot of industry are realizing it isn't about swapping from one material to another that is equally single use and hits the bin into a waste system. We we humans pump out 2 billion tons of waste every single year. We've kind of normalized waste. We think that's okay, and it isn't normal to create waste. We are the waste generation, really, you and I, I'm afraid, Ian. And that's the shift, is thinking, how can you move your business to something where you don't generate waste, where you have responsibility. Whatever material you decide to build your product, wrap your product in, you are responsible for its first, second, third, fourth, forever life. And when we talk about extended producer responsibility, I think this is where it's eventually going to end up. So that means, how would you design differently at the beginning then? If you're going to be responsible for it, would you make it out of a toxic petrochemical material that is going to pollute the planet and damage everything that lives on it? Probably not. Not when you can see that juggernaut of corporate risk coming down the line as well. So you would have to reimagine how you produce things in the first place. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity, particularly for the creative industry, to think, because everything is created, a financial system or a bottle or whatever, everything is designed at the very beginning, even if it's a bad design. And there's an incredible opportunity right now for the creative community, which is huge, to be part of that reimagining a new future. So
do you think
especially this one, because that for me is a brilliant example of the 5th biggest polluter on the planet, Unilever, deciding, rather than perhaps doing a refill model or a more sustainable version of their stick deodorant, they have completely redesigned it into something that is elevated, aspirational, beautiful. I mean, it looks like something that Apple would have designed, made out of stainless steel, guaranteed for a lifetime. They could have put it in a brown card tube. But what I love is that by doing something like this with one of the biggest personal care brands, Dove, that they have reimagined how we're going to take and make and have responsibility for everything going forward.
So what are you doing to encourage changes in policy? I know you can speak to the government, but you know, what roles can governments play in changing behaviour?
Huge roles. And ultimately, we know we have to have a level playing field. We need more policy. We need taxation. You know, plastic is the most subsidized material in the world, from the most subsidized industry in the world. That's the bit that we need to get right. And when we're talking about how hard it is for industry leaders to change the engine of the fighter jet they're flying right now, they have to be legislated into it. There has to, because otherwise it's too hard. And one thing that we know is all these voluntary commitments that are out there right now. The Pew Foundation report that came out at the end of last year evaluated if every voluntary commitment from all industry globally, that includes the UK and the EU Plastic Pact, if every government commitment actually met its target, we would see a 7% reduction in ocean pollution by the year 2040. And none of them are on track. So it clearly shows we're not doing nearly enough. What we're doing, we're failing at. So a lot of things need to change very, very quickly. So for me, I love thinking of it as that, I think of it like a burger, you know, that you've got this burger of who are the stakeholders, where can change happen? And at the bottom of that burger, you've got us, the shopping public, completely disempowered. You know, we don't decide what things are made of. I buy the chicken. I don't buy the thing that it's wrapped in. I want the chicken. So how can you wrap it and give it to me in a different way? And then you've got at the top of that bun, the nice seedy bun, you've got governments very much enthralled to the fossil fuel industry still, thinking short term, thinking 4 years maximum. But the bit that I find so fascinating is that juicy burger bit in the middle, which is industry. So I see it that it's industry's job to change how they make and sell things to the public, and it's government's job to mandate that industry do it and do it fast.
And what sort of material should people be switching to, from plastic to what? What are the best alternatives? There was this fantastic interview with a chemical scientist the other day, and he said, if we hadn't invented plastic, we would have invented another kind of plastic. And I know that sounds really plonky, but it really resonated with me. If it wasn't the fossil fuel derivative that we know, there would have been something else that enabled us to ramp up
to this hyper consumptive lifestyle that we have right now, that enable, you know, to really fuel the wheels of industry and commerce in the way that it has. And I think now there are a lot of people who are thinking, we'll just tread water for a bit longer and we'll just wait and see if maybe there's a new plastic down the road, you know, a new bioplastic or something that we can just call it more sustainable. But I think that we've realized, particularly in the last 2 years, that isn't going to be the answer. What we have to have now, I mean, yes, there'll be a myriad of new materials, of incredible things like seaweed and mushrooms and cellulose, and, you know, some of the things that are so abundant in nature and can go back to nature in a very unharmful way, so long as we don't mess with them too much. But also we need to look at systems changes. And what I get more excited about now is thinking, this is not about business doing badly. This is about us just reframing what we make, how much we make, and what we expect people to buy. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could now move into a new generation where we buy less, buy better, share more, rent more, repair more, all of those things? Because that doesn't mean that suddenly industry is in massive decline, because, you know, where is the repairing industry? You know, do you remember there used to be a guy that you would take your things in and he would fix them? My son rang me and said, oh, our iron's broke. Where do I get it fixed?
Everybody can do it. Yeah.
Nobody can do it. He said, I really want to get it fixed.
There are brands like Patagonia who are now repairing for life, of course. So
yeah,
you know.
and that I feel is the future, because the amount of brand loyalty that you will engender by giving that kind of service. I love this concept of, you don't own things in the same way anymore, like IKEA. The whole model with IKEA going forward, and they don't even know how they're going to do it, but they have been brave enough to say, we know this is the right way. You will never own anything from IKEA in the future.
Rent it.
Yeah. You will borrow, you will rent it, and then when you don't need it, you give it back, and they are responsible for it. So imagine you're never going to see a mattress, you know, an IKEA mattress certainly, dumped.
So talk to me about Plastic Pact. You know, there are some fairly major companies. Some of the companies you've just mentioned are members of the Plastic Pact. What's that all about? You know, is that a good thing that they're part of this Plastic Pact?
Well, I think cohesion between everybody and acknowledgement of the issue is always important. But my concern is that the Plastic Pact is included in that stat of, even if everybody achieved what they have set out to achieve, we'd only see a 7% reduction by 2040. So it's not going far enough. And there is often this safety, really, in, oh, I believe in circular economy, you know, I've paid my millions, or I'm part of the Plastic Pact. So there's a lot of, I hate to say it, but talking shops, where I'm only interested in action shops. So, you know, what have you done? You know, all these pacts and pledges and promises that are so far down the road, half the people in power now are not going to be in power at that stage. So we need to really hold people much more accountable for their actions and their deliverables. And the other problem we have is no one has the same metrics. Yeah. So, you know, every supermarket really will evaluate their plastic footprint on slightly different metrics. Until we have transparent reporting, which has to come from government policy, until we have mandatory agreed metrics, so everybody is reporting, you know, singing to the same hymn sheet, we will never really know the problem. And if you can't count it, you can't change it.
You know, just last week in California, of course, they filed a motion to take on the plastics industry, or some of the brands that pump out plastic bottles. That's an interesting sign of things potentially changing, isn't it?
Very interesting, yes. And just the fact that you probably saw that the defendants, and it is your PepsiCos, your Coca-Colas, trying to move the location of the hearing so that it would be in a jurisdiction that was perhaps more amenable, and the judge saying, nope, you know, this is going to be heard in California. So I know that for the NGOs that have taken that action, that was a very big win for them. But it's right, isn't it? I mean, Ian, what is the difference between ExxonMobil and that Valdez oil spill and the devastation that they caused the environment. We knew who was responsible for that. We knew who had to go and clean it up. We knew who had to pay the fine. And yet I see pictures of the devastation of plastic pollution, which is another form of fossil fuel pollution. And nobody, the Coca-Colas of the world have zero responsibility for the impact, the devastation that they cause the environment. How have we allowed that world to evolve?
Well, it's about to change, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yep. And for me, I always try and flip that word when people talk about sustainability. It's such a boring word. And I always try and flip it and say, somebody said to me, yeah, sustainable, it's not exactly aspirational, is it? Someone said to me, how's your marriage? And I said, oh, it's sustainable. Oh, great, back in your world. I love the idea of it's about responsibility. And right now we've had, as an industry, and as an ex-plastic sinner, I can say this, we had zero responsibility with what happened to the
we don't even take responsibility for our own plastic waste. We export it to poor countries, don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah. What's that all about?
What is that all about? And I am particularly ashamed by that we, a relatively rich country like the UK, we are the second biggest creator per capita of plastic waste. The Americans pip us to pole position there. The US is the biggest exporter of plastic waste globally, and Europe is number 2. So, and where does it all end up? We're united by one ocean. We have one atmosphere. So when our plastic recycled waste, of which we are sending 200 huge shipping containers every single day to Turkey alone, and the BBC do exposés saying that, Hillingdon County Council recycling bags are being burnt at the roadside of Turkish villages. We have to recognise that you cannot offshore your guilt in this way. We have to deal with our own dirt, and we have been doing this for decades.
But that's about to change, isn't it? We're about to stop exporting our waste, I believe.
Well, yes, Europe brought the ban on the export of plastic waste to developing countries. That came into effect from the 1st of January this year. The UK are much slower, and there's a loophole in the UK law which we are really pushing to close, which basically means that if the recipient says that they want the waste, you can still send it, which really doesn't get us around the problem. And of course, places like Turkey would not be included. So we would love to see, we're pushing actually, we've got a number of different amends to the current environment bill that we're pushing for. And one of them is to close that loophole, but also let's have a ban on the export of plastic waste for incineration, because there's nothing circular about burning plastic.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So, well, look, thanks for your time. I'm going to just last question, because I know you're, you probably want to get some downtime now. But my last question is, and you know what it is. So, what are you reading at the moment? What's on your reading list at the very moment in time? Oh, you've just frozen. Oh, lost you then.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Yeah. Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah,
Oh,
we
hang on a minute.
What's on your?
So I did a talk in this beautiful Greek island. It was of Kea, and I met this very inspirational woman, young woman, lives in Germany, big entrepreneur, built all these different platforms. I mean, really fascinating. It's amazing when you meet people and just say, oh my God, you're the age of my son, and look what you've done. And I was talking to her recently, and we were talking about different books and things. And one of my like all-time books is The 4 Agreements. Have you ever read that?
Not yet. It's on the list.
Ah, it's on your list. Okay. So The 4 Agreements. And she said, oh yeah. Yeah, yes. So yes, I love The 4 Agreements. Absolute game-changing book for me too. But my book, this is her. My book is called The Surrender Experiment, because that's the book that changed my life. And so I am currently on Audible listening to The Surrender Experiment.
Okay.
And it's a phenomenal story. And it's quite slow and measured. But anybody who's interested, I absolutely encourage you to go with it, because it's the story of this man's life. And he basically decides, I'm going to give in to the flow of life. And where that flow of life takes him, and the things that happen are quite extraordinary. You don't see them coming at all. So I'm really enjoying listening to this book, because it's really making me think, I'm a very, I want things to happen, and I want them to happen now, and they're not fast enough, and and I'm very much like, no, nothing happens unless you work really hard, and it's not meant to be easy, and that's just my natural bent as an entrepreneur. But what I'm learning from this book is sometimes just see where life takes you, and don't resist things. Go with that flow, because you never know what the intention of life is going to be. So I think it's a very good book for me, and I haven't even finished it yet, but I highly recommend it.
I shall definitely add that to my list. Well, look, Sian, always fascinating listening to you. Thanks so much for your time. Love working with you. You're an inspiration.
Oh, right back at you, Ian. It's been a wonderful pleasure getting to know you more. And who would imagine that LinkedIn some 2.5 years ago, and here we are now.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, keep well, and I'll see you soon.